In the forgotten annals of the Pleistocene, the world was not a garden, but an arena.
Here, survival was not merely instinct. It was a crusade against an indifferent universe.
To drink from the water was to gamble with destiny itself. Now, let the chronicle of this lost ruler begin.
The river coiled through the valley like a serpent of silver and glass. To the uninitiated eye, it was a sanctuary, a giver of life amidst the harsh, dry scrub of the endless steppe.
But in this land of monsters, beauty is merely the mask worn by death. The water did not just quench thirst, it brokered a deadly exchange. It drew the herds, the colossal wandering titans of the age, and in their wake, it drew the executioners. This was no common watering hole. It was a contested borderland, a jagged frontier. The reeds did not sway in the wind. They trembled. The reeds did not sway in the wind. They trembled. As if whispering warnings to those foolish enough to approach the banks without a tribute of caution. Every ripple on the surface was a question. Who watches from the other side? Every rustle in the high grass was a potential declaration of war. In this era, peace was a myth, a fleeting illusion shattered by the setting sun. As the light began to bleed away from the sky, painting the water in hues of bruised purple and charcoal, the stage was set for a tragedy as old as time. The theater was silent, but the audience, the scavengers, the spies, the lesser thieves, was already gathering in the wings, waiting for the leading actors to take their places. The water flowed on, indifferent and cold. A deceptive mirror that reflected not just the sky, but the inevitable collision of hunger and power. Out of the deepening gloom, a shape coalesced, not born of... She was the queen of this jagged frontier, a creature whose very existence was a masterclass in the philosophy of the ambush. The Smilodon did not trot like the wolf, or pace anxiously like the hyena. She moved with a hydraulic, terrifying grace, a mechanism of muscle and bone designed for a singular, explosive purpose. She was not built for the marathon. She was built for the massacre. Her physique was a testament to a specific kind of warfare, the grappling match. Where others relied on speed to exhaust their prey, she relied on raw, overwhelming power to crush it. Her shoulders were mountains of dense fiber, capable of wrestling the great beasts of the steppe to the ground, holding them pinned beneath her weight while she delivered the coup de grace. And it was there, gleaming in the dying light, that her crown jewels were revealed, the twin sabers. These were not merely teeth. They were precision instruments, surgical tools designed to sever the vital arteries of a struggling victim in a single, devastating stroke. She stood over her prize, a juvenile bison that had strayed too close to the reed banks, with the possessive arrogance of a monarch.
The carcass lay still, steam rising from its flank into the cooling air, a beacon of scent that would soon drift downriver. This was her throne for the night.
In the economy of the Pleistocene, a kill of this magnitude was wealth beyond measure, a fortress of sustenance that could sustain her and the hidden cubs waiting in the den miles away. But the Smilodon was a solitary ruler. She commanded no legion. She shared her dominion with no council.
Her authority was absolute, but it was also fragile, resting entirely on her ability to project an aura of invulnerability. She crouched low beside the fallen beast, her golden eyes scanning the perimeter with a forensic intensity. She did not eat immediately. To eat was to lower one's guard, to surrender the advantage of total awareness.
Instead, she waited, listening to the intricate symphony of the riverbank.
Filtering out the harmless rustle of the wind from the deliberate footfall of an intruder. Her philosophy was one of silence. In a world of roaring titans and trumpeting herds, she wielded quiet as a weapon.
It was a heavy, suffocating silence that she imposed upon the landscape.
The presence of the apex predator created a vacuum in the natural order. She was the architect of this scene, a painter who had used violence to create a masterpiece of stillness. She licked a smear of chrism from her paw, her movements languid yet coiled.
Yet, even a queen must adhere to the laws of the wild. Her solitude was her strength, allowing her to move unseen, but it was also her greatest liability. If a challenge came, there would be no reinforcements.
There would be no pack to flank the enemy, no chaotic swarm to confuse the attacker.
There would be only her, the river, and the weight of the crown she wore.
She placed a heavy paw upon the bison's flank, claiming it, daring the darkness to dispute her ownership.
The truce of the riverbank was not broken by a roar.
The wind, which had been the queen's ally, suddenly turned traitor, shifting direction and carrying the metallic scent of her kill deep into the hinterlands.
And from those hinterlands, the response was immediate.
They did not arrive as individuals. They arrived as a phenomenon, a gray tide seeping through the gaps in the brush.
The dire wolves. If the Smilodon was the philosophy of the scalpel, precise, solitary, and devastating,
individually, they were smaller than the queen, lacking her immense grappling strength and her terrifying sabers. But to view them as individuals was to misunderstand their nature.
the queen rose from her crouch, her hackles bristling like a ridge of iron spikes along her spine. She sensed the shift in the atmosphere before she saw them.
The silence she had imposed upon the valley was shattered, replaced by the suffocating pressure of being watched from all sides. One by one, they stepped into the moonlight, their eyes reflecting the pale luminescence of the river. This was the Legion of Shadows, and they had come to test the boundaries of her sovereign domain.
They did not rush her. That was the mistake of the amateur.
Instead, they flowed around her, a liquid barrier cutting off her retreat.
Triangulation complete. Formation analysis, optimal V. Threat assessment, high.
They were drawing a noose, tightening the circle with a terrifying, disciplined patience.
The Smilodon let out a low, rumbling growl, a subsonic vibration that shook the rib cages of the nearest wolves.
It was a declaration of ownership, a warning that the throne was occupied.
But the Legion did not flinch. They knew the limitations of her power.
They knew she was a creature of explosive energy, a sprinter in a world of marathon runners. If they could force her to expend that energy, if they could goad her into a series of futile lunges,
Her strength would evaporate, leaving her vulnerable to the swarm.
a large male, the field commander of this raiding party, stepped closer, snapping his jaws inches from her flank.
The queen spun, her saber slashing the air with the speed of a whip crack. But the wolf was already gone, dancing back out of range.
The psychological weight of the encounter began to shift.
The Smilodon stood over her kill, her massive paws planted firmly on the earth. But she was no longer the hunter. The pack circled endlessly, a carousel of gray fur and snapping teeth, wearing down her nerves before they even touched her skin. They were stealing her focus, forcing her to look everywhere at once. It was a clash of two ancient dynasties, the aristocracy of power versus the democracy of violence.
The queen possessed the weapons to kill any single one of them, but she could not kill them all.
And as the circle tightened, the air grew thick with the anticipation of the inevitable.
The negotiation was over. The diplomacy of posturing had failed. The river, once a mirror, was about to become a witness.
And then, the dam broke. The suspense that had held the valley in a breathless chokehold shattered into a frenzy of fur and teeth.
A wave crashing against a solitary cliff. The first wolf lunged for the queen's hindquarters, a suicidal feint designed to turn her head.
As she spun to meet the threat, the trap sprang shut. more wolves slammed into her flanks, their jaws locking onto the thick muscle of her shoulders. The air was instantly filled with the terrible music of war, the wet tearing of flesh, the high-pitched yelps of the wounded, and the earth-shaking roars of the cornered monarch. The Smilodon fought with the terrifying grandeur of a natural disaster.
She was a whirlwind of claws and ivory.
With a swipe of her massive foreleg, she caught a wolf in midair, the impact shattering its ribs and sending it tumbling into the reeds.
She was not fighting for food now. She was fighting for the sanctity of her existence.
She reared up, shaking off the attackers clinging to her back like parasites, and brought her full weight down upon a careless assailant. Here, the terrible efficiency of her anatomy was revealed. It was a surgical execution amidst the chaos.
The great canines sheared through the neck, severing the life cord in a single, devastating instant.
The wolf went limp beneath her, a sacrifice to the Queen's wrath. But the Legion's philosophy was cruel mathematics. They were willing to spend lives to buy victory.
The Queen roared, a sound of defiance that echoed off the distant canyon walls, but it was tinged with the realization of defeat.
She was powerful, but she was mortal. Her energy was fading, burned away in the furnace of the melee.
While the pack seemed to possess an inexhaustible reservoir of endurance. They had breached the fortress. They had turned her throne into a slaughterhouse.
To persist was to die. In the cold logic of the wild, pride is a luxury the survivor cannot afford. With a final, explosive snarl that momentarily drove the circle back, the Smilodon made her choice.
She abandoned the bison. She abandoned the prize she had stalked and killed.
Launching herself through a gap in the gray wall of bodies, she crashed into the river, the water churning around her retreating form. A chilling proclamation that the era of the solitary ruler had ended, and the age of the mob had begun.
Miles downstream, where the river widens and the current slows, the Queen hauled herself onto the muddy bank.
She did not roar. She did not look back toward the site of her humiliation.
Where the chaotic chorus of the Legion, feasting on her prize, drifted faintly on the wind.
She limped slightly, a testament to the crushing jaw force of the wolves. But she did not fall.
This was the burden of the solitary crown. There was no one to lick her wounds, no one to share the watch while she slept. Her dominion was absolute, but it was also terrifyingly lonely. Wounded and weary before the sun rose. The ambush at the river was not merely a stolen meal. It was a reminder of the brutal contract of the Pleistocene.
Power is not a permanent state. It is a lease, renewed daily by blood and vigilance. The Smilodon shook the water from her fur, the droplets scattering like diamonds in the moonlight.
She was scarred. She was starving. But she was still the queen.
With a low exhale that was half sigh, half growl, she melted back into the tall grass, a ghost returning to the haunting. History remembers these monsters for their terrible teeth and their immense power, but it often forgets their tragedy. They lived in a world where a single mistake, a single lost meal,
Or a single hidden rival could topple a dynasty. Theirs was a kingdom built on sand, constantly shifting, constantly demanding the ultimate price for survival.
And when the end finally came, the silence they left behind was the loudest sound on Earth.